It is the quietest part of the night, and a woman lies frozen under her blankets, eyes wide open in the dark. A single sound has just reached her from the hallway, a soft creak of weight on old wood, exactly where no sound should be. She does not move. She does not breathe. And then, before a single clear thought has formed in her mind, something rolls across her skin. A wave of tiny bumps rises down her arms and up the back of her neck, and the fine hairs on her body stand straight up on end. Her body has reacted before she has. It has done something ancient, something automatic, something she did not choose. And in that small electric ripple across her skin lies one of the strangest and most beautiful secrets your body still keeps. We like to think of goosebumps as nothing. A meaningless shiver, a quirk of cold skin, a leftover twitch with no purpose at all. That is the story most of us never even bother to question. But that story misses something enormous. Those little bumps are not random noise. They are the visible firing of a reflex so old it was already ancient before your species existed. A message pressed into your skin by a world of danger and cold that vanished long ago. And here is the part that should give you pause the next time it happens. That reflex is not a memory. It is not a picture in a museum. It is still wired into you, fully alive, firing tonight exactly as it fired in creatures that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. To understand why your skin does this, we cannot start with you. We have to rewind, far past your birth, past the first humans, past even the first primates, to ancestors you would not recognize as family at all. Because the real answer was written into flesh long before anyone walked upright, in bodies covered head to toe in thick fur. So hold two questions as we go. Where did this strange skin reflex actually come from, in a body so unlike your own? And if it clearly does so little for a nearly hairless human now, why has it not simply faded away and left us smooth and still? Start with the cold, because the cold came first. Picture a small furred creature huddled on a freezing night, deep in a time before humans, before the warm safety of fire or shelter. Its body faces a brutal problem. Heat is leaking out of it into the merciless air, and if it loses too much, it dies before morning. But this creature carries a coat of fur, and buried at the root of every single hair sits a tiny muscle. When the cold bites, those countless little muscles all contract at once, and each one tugs its hair upright. In a furred body, the effect is transforming. The whole coat puffs outward and stands tall, and in doing so it traps a thick layer of warm air against the skin, a living blanket of trapped heat. That is the true birthplace of the goosebump. It was never about the bump. It was about raising the fur. And to understand why holding heat mattered so desperately, picture the world these creatures were born into. Long before them, the animals that ruled the earth ran cold, borrowing warmth from the sun and slowing to a crawl the moment it set. Our distant ancestors were trying something radically different and expensive. They were burning fuel inside their own bodies to stay warm from within, running a private furnace that never switched off. That inner fire let them hunt in the freezing dark, stay alert through bitter nights, and live in places a cold-blooded rival could not. But a furnace is only as good as its insulation. A body that makes its own heat and then lets it pour uselessly into the night is a body burning itself out for nothing. So every trick for trapping that precious warmth was worth its weight in survival, and a coat that could puff thicker on command was one of the finest tricks of all. The tiny muscle at the root of each hair was not a small thing. It was a valve on the furnace, guarding the heat that kept a warm-blooded animal alive. Notice what is really happening here, because it is the heart of everything that follows. The bump you see is just a side effect. The actual machine is that little muscle at the base of the hair, contracting to lift the strand. In a thick coat, Lifting every hair at once builds an insulating shield that can mean the difference between surviving a freezing night and never seeing the dawn. For a small, warm-blooded animal fighting to hold its heat, this was not a quirk. It was survival equipment, installed at the root of every hair, ready to fire the instant the temperature dropped. And that same equipment, unchanged in its basic design, is sitting under every hair on your body right now. But cold was only the first job this reflex learned to do. Somewhere along the way, the very same machinery was recruited for a second, entirely different purpose. And this is where the story turns from comfort to survival of a sharper kind. Imagine that same furred creature, no longer shivering, but frozen in sudden fear. A predator has appeared at the edge of the clearing. In that instant, a flood of alarm signals races through the body, and the identical muscles that fight the cold all fire again, snapping every hair upright at once. Only now, the purpose is not warmth. It is size. A frightened animal with its fur standing fully on end looks visibly bigger, bristling and swollen, harder to attack, and less worth the risk. You have watched a cornered cat do this, its tail bushed out to twice its width, its whole body arched and enormous. That is the exact same reflex, the exact same tiny muscles pressed into the service of a bluff. And it was a bluff worth having. In a tense standoff on the forest floor, a predator weighing whether to lunge reads its target for weakness, for size, for the risk of injury. An animal that swells in an instant, its coat flaring out like a threat made visible, changes that grim arithmetic. It buys a heartbeat of hesitation, and a single heartbeat of hesitation can be the whole distance between being caught and slipping away into the trees. The reflex did not need to win a fight. It only had to make the attacker pause. Look around the living world, and you can still watch this reflex at work everywhere, which is the clearest sign of how deep its roots run. A frightened cat bushes its tail to twice its size. A cold bird fluffs into a round ball of feathers to trap the warmth against its body. A threatened dog raises a sharp ridge of hair along its spine. These are not separate inventions. They are the same ancient response, inherited from the same distant well of ancestors, playing out through fur and feather across creatures that parted ways an unimaginably long time ago. When your own skin prickles, you are joining a chorus that stretches across the whole family tree of warm-blooded life. So one ancient mechanism ended up serving two masters. Cold triggered it to trap heat. Fear triggered it to fake size. Both used the same muscles, the same hairs, the same instant automatic response, and both were wired straight into the body's oldest survival circuits, the ones that act long before conscious thought can catch up. This is why that woman in the dark bristled before she could even think. Her body was running a program written for a furred animal facing a threat in the night, a program that fires faster than fear itself can be named. That reflex, in the most literal sense, is a piece of your deep ancestry still living inside you. Notice how the two jobs share a single set of wires. Cold and terror feel like opposite worlds, one slow and creeping, one sudden and electric. Yet in the body they pull the same lever. Both plug into the ancient automatic branch of the nervous system that runs beneath your awareness, the one that quickens the heart, floods the blood with alarm, and readies the body to fight or flee before you have decided anything at all. The hair-raising muscles were simply patched into that same emergency network, so the body's oldest alarms could raise its coat in the same breath they raised its pulse. This is why the reflex feels so involuntary, so far beyond your control. It was wired, from the very start, into the part of you that acts first and explains itself never. Which brings us to the puzzle that makes this whole story strange. If goosebumps were built to lift a coat of fur, then look at what happened to us. Our ancestors lost that coat. Over a long stretch of time, as our lineage changed the way it lived, moved, and cooled itself, the thick fur thinned away until human skin became the nearly bare surface you see today. And here is the twist that should stop you cold. The fur vanished, but the muscles that lifted it did not. Every one of those tiny hair-raising muscles is still there, still anchored beneath every faint hair on your arms, still firing on cue at cold and at fear. We kept the engine long after we scrapped the vehicle it was built to drive. And the loss of that coat was not an accident either. As our ancestors moved into hot, open country and began to walk and run for long stretches under a punishing sun, their greatest danger flipped from freezing to overheating. A thick coat that once saved lives in the cold now threatened to cook the body from the inside during a long chase. So the fur thinned, and the skin filled instead with sweat glands, trading a blanket for a cooling system. Step by step, the very insulation the hair-raising muscles were built to command was stripped away, not because it had failed, but because a new world demanded the opposite. The muscles were left holding the controls to a machine that had quietly been dismantled around them. This is a genuine mystery, and it deserves a real answer rather than a shrug. Evolution is not sentimental. It strips away what no longer earns its place. It hollowed the eyes from cavefish left in the dark. It shrank structures that stopped paying their way across countless lineages. So why on earth would it keep an elaborate net of muscles whose entire job, raising a warm, bristling coat, became almost pointless the moment the coat disappeared? Why are you still equipped, right now, with the hardware to fluff a fur you no longer have? To solve this, we have to stop looking at the skin and start thinking like a detective. Lay the suspects on the table one by one. The first possibility is that goosebumps are secretly still useful to a bare human. But this suspect collapses under questioning. On mostly hairless skin, raising those wispy little hairs traps almost no warmth and makes you look not one bit bigger to anything. As the tool it was designed to be, it does essentially nothing for you now. So plain, direct usefulness is not what is keeping it alive. The second suspect is far more convincing, and it is the one that cracks the case. The reflex survives not because it still works, but because it is astonishingly cheap to keep and would be surprisingly expensive to remove. Think about what this system actually is. It is a tiny muscle at the base of each hair, wired into a deep and ancient branch of the nervous system that also governs your heartbeat, your sweat, and your response to fear, all firing together automatically. That wiring is woven into the body's core survival circuitry, the same circuitry you absolutely cannot live without. To delete goosebumps specifically, evolution would have to reach in and carefully unpick one small thread from a control system that is doing a dozen other essential jobs at the same time, and do it without damaging any of the rest. And the crucial point is this: there is no reward waiting for the body that manages it. Those little muscles cost almost nothing to build and almost nothing to carry. They do not slow you down, they do not drain meaningful energy, they do not make you weaker or easier prey. So there is simply no pressure pushing to remove them, and a real cost and risk to trying. Faced with a harmless, nearly free leftover tangled into vital wiring, evolution does the same thing it so often does. It leaves it exactly where it is. The goosebump reflex is a free passenger, riding along on the ancient survival system it was always plugged into, too cheap to be worth deleting and too entangled to remove safely. That is the button on the mystery. It did not stay because it works. It stayed because getting rid of it was never worth the trouble. Evolution is not a tidy engineer clearing out every unused room. It is a builder that only tears down a wall when the wall is in the way. These little muscles block nothing and cost nothing, so they were simply left standing, quietly wired into a body that no longer needs what they were built to do. A relic survives not by being useful, but by being harmless enough to ignore. And there is one last clue that proves the machinery is not dead, only repurposed. Think about the last time goosebumps swept over you when you were not cold and not afraid at all. A soaring piece of music, a powerful moment in a film, a memory that suddenly overwhelmed you. In those instants, the exact same ancient muscles fire, the same hairs lift, driven by the same deep emotional circuitry that fear once used. The old survival response has been quietly borrowed by our richest feelings, so that a wave of awe can raise the very hairs that once rose against a wolf in the dark. The equipment never left. It simply found new moments to answer. Think about what that really means. The same jolt that once bristled the coat of a terrified animal now rises when a choir swells to its peak, when a crowd roars as one, when a story lands its final line. Our species took an ancient alarm and wired it into wonder, so that the body which once bristled at danger now bristles at beauty. The hardware did not change, only the triggers did. And that quiet repurposing is the strongest proof of all that this machinery is fully, stubbornly alive. Now step back and feel how far we have traveled. We began with a woman frozen in the dark, her skin prickling before she understood why. We ended up staring across hundreds of millions of years, watching a small, furred creature puff its coat against a killing frost, watching a cornered animal bristle to twice its size before a predator, watching that same faithful reflex ride down through countless generations into a body that finally shed the very fur it was made to lift. The bumps on that woman's arms were not noise, and they were never meaningless. They were a signal fired by the oldest parts of her, proof that under her bare modern skin still runs the wiring of an animal built for a colder, more dangerous world. And here is what lingers once the fear drains away. That reflex is not finished, not sealed in the past, not gone. It runs again, in full, every time cold air hits your arm, every time a threat spikes your pulse, every time a piece of music reaches somewhere words cannot. The same tiny muscles, the same ancient signal, the same rising of hairs that are mostly no longer there, on a schedule set long before you were born. When that woman lay bristling in the dark, she was not glitching. She was feeling the oldest part of her own body answer a call that has never once stopped coming. So the next time your skin ripples for no reason you can name, remember what those bumps really are. Not a flaw, not random static. A living echo of a furred ancestor bracing against the cold and the dark, still wired into you, still answering, hundreds of millions of years later. If that idea raises the hair on your arms even now, then stay with me. Your body is full of these hidden echoes, ancient reflexes and forgotten tools still folded quietly into your flesh, and every one of them has a story just as old and just as alive as this one.